Bismillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashraf al-anbiya wal mursaleen. Nabiyana Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. My dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. And a good day to all of you joining us from different parts of the world. It is indeed a great pleasure for me to welcome you on behalf of Bahrain Institute of Banking and Finance, a training arm of the Central Bank of Bahrain, to our monthly talk number 4 for the year 2025, which is part of our Islamic Finance talk series. BIBF is the training arm of the Central Bank of Bahrain. As the premier provider of financial education and training in the region, we provide education in business and finance through our degree programs, undergraduate and postgraduate degree programs, professional qualifications, as well as our own qualifications, including short training programs ranging from 1 day, 2 day, 3 day courses to long-term courses ranging from our professional courses through our 6 centers of excellence. These centers of excellence are banking and finance, Islamic finance, insurance, leadership and management, digital transformation, and project management. For more information, you may wish to visit bibf.com. My name is Dr. Rizwan Malik. I head up the Islamic Finance Center here at BIBF. We are proud to host this Islamic Finance Talk series for discussing important issues and emerging topics within the global Islamic economics, banking, and finance landscape. The aim through these talks is to foster meaningful dialogue, facilitate exchange of knowledge, and explore evolving landscape of the industry. As we embark on this journey, we hope to inspire innovation, promote best practices, and contribute to the sustainable development of Islamic finance industry, as well as enhance understanding of some of the important and new topics within the Islamic banking and finance industry. Today's talk is one of the most important area that is talked about within the industry. In fact, it's a topic that a lot of people thought or think that they understand from a generic perspective by looking at few candle charts and making decisions. But perhaps we have seen in the last couple of years that it's not just that, it's more than that. The topic of today's talk is crypto, and crypto with special reference to Islamic finance with a particular focus on Bitcoin. As we come together here today, it is evident that the world of finance is undergoing a profound transformation, driven by rapid advancements in technology and the emergence of new financial instruments such as cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin and other such cryptocurrencies has sparked, of course, intense global debates, ranging from their potential to revolutionize the monetary systems to their alignment with ethical and legal framework. For us in the Islamic finance industry, these discussions take on an even deeper dimension as we explore the Sharia compliance of cryptocurrencies, their impact on wealth distribution, and their capacity to uphold the principles of justice, transparency, and risk sharing that are central to Islamic finance. And of course, within the Islamic finance, we have not received a particular resolution, or we have not reached a particular resolution on the cryptocurrency as well itself. This particular talk is an initiative towards better understanding of cryptocurrency. What do we think of it? How does it work? And in particular, if they are legitimate. So is Bitcoin a legitimate store of value and medium of exchange within the framework of Islamic finance? How can cryptocurrency contribute to financial inclusion and economic justice, particularly in underserved Muslim communities? What are the risks, challenges, and opportunities for integrating crypto into the broader Islamic financial ecosystem? So as we engage in these discussions, let us recognize that this is not just a theoretical exercise. The decision that we make in general from our understanding or of our misunderstanding can actually shape the future of Islamic finance through the regulatory side, through the practice, or otherwise. And of course, it has the far-reaching implications, not just for the Islamic finance industry, but for the global economy and the financial well-being of a lot of people around the world. So from our perspective, the idea is to approach this discussion from an open mind through inquiry and a shared commitment to advancing the principles of Islamic finance in this rapidly evolving world. We are very, very glad to have a very, very distinguished speaker with us today, Professor Abdul Azim Abu Zaid, who is a professor at Qatar Foundation and the Islamic Finance Program. He is a man who needs no introduction. I personally regard him really highly because of his thirst for knowledge, as well as deeper understanding of some of the very, very important and pertinent topics within the Islamic bank and finance industry, a proponent of the industry, as well as a proponent of the good practices of the industry, inshallah, and on his journey to enhancing the practices. Professor Abdul Azim holds a PhD and master's in Islamic financial law. He, mashallah, holds 3 BAs in Islamic law, Arabic language, and English literature, and 2 higher studies diploma in Islamic law and human sciences. He has an extensive experience both in the academia side as well as in the banking and finance side, where he has advised either through sitting on the Sharia board of the banks or through working for financial institutions on some of the important aspects of Islamic bank and finance. So he combines the practical experience with the theoretical foundation in either providing through his training work that he has done, as well as the head of Sharia at an Islamic financial institution, or through the academic hat that he wears as we speak. He is very profound, mashallah, and has published a lot of papers in the international journals, magazines, as well as presented over more than 70 papers at various international conferences. So very honored to have Professor Abdul Azim Abu Zaid with us. Before I hand it over to him, we are also very thankful to Hijaz, who are our partners in bringing these Islamic Finance Talks 2025 to you. Hijaz is a leading financial institution that delivers a broad range of Islamic financial services across investment management and financial advice, financial services, as well as some of the fund management capabilities, headquartered in Melbourne, Australia, with a second office here in Bahrain. So before any further ado, I would actually pass it on to Professor Abdul Azim Abu Zaid to take us forward for the next 60 odd minutes through his sharing of experiences and knowledge. But I would also like this session to be more interactive, inshallah, and we hope that more and more people can engage in the discussion. We have kept the chat tab muted for now. We would like you to use the Q&A tab for any questions that you have. So please use the Q&A tab which appears on top of your screen. And if you have any comments you would like to ask by voice, if the time permits, we might allow that towards the end of the session, inshallah. So the presentation will also be put on our YouTube channel, BIBF, if you would like to refer to it later on. And if there are, let's keep this more interactive and engaging, inshallah. So let's keep the questions towards the end. Any questions that you have, please put it up in the Q&A tab. And of course, time permitting, we would take those questions towards the end. So without any further ado, I have the pleasure of virtually or welcoming Professor Abdul Azim virtually on the platform. Professor Abdul Azim, over to you. Very thankful for your time. And honored to have you on this talk series. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ridwan. Jazakallah khairan. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. Of course, I would have to thank Dr. Ridwan for introducing me, and also BIBF for organizing this event, and also I thank, of course, all the participants and attendees. I will try to be brief so that I can, we can spare more time, for the interaction from the participant side. Of course, the topic is cryptocurrencies from Sharia perspective. This is a topic that has been debated by the contemporary scholars for so long, and it has many issues, many unresolved Sharia issues that need to be revisited and to be deeply and profoundly looked into. Cryptocurrencies, of course, they are a form of currencies that's relatively new to our world. I would discuss cryptocurrencies from Sharia perspective from two angles. The first one relates to whether, let's say, it's a valid currency from Sharia point of view, from the Sharia perspective. And then we'll talk about the tradability of or trading in cryptocurrencies, because you know that the issue from Sharia perspective can be discussed from two sides. The first one is whether the Sharia would recognize cryptocurrency as a valid currency, and the other one is trading in cryptocurrency, because people mostly use or buy cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin for the sake of trading rather than for the sake of using it as a currency. So that's why we need to discuss these two important points. I will try to talk generally about the Sharia rules pertaining to currencies, and from there we can move to discuss cryptocurrencies in particular, because these general Sharia rules, of course, would apply to any currency that people may use at one time. Of course, you see, from Sharia point of view, you know that the Islam has never limited the concept of money to gold or silver. We know that, of course, when Islam came more than 14 centuries ago, people at the time in Arabia, they used to use gold, the golden dinar, as well as the silver dirham. And these currencies were not minted even in Arabia. They were minted elsewhere, like let's say in Persia or in the Roman Empire. So Muslims started using, of course, the long time ago, started using the dinar and the dirham, and they didn't introduce their own currency. Then at a later stage, they started minting their own currency, which also used to be gold and silver, the same dinar and dirham. And even the very word dinar or dirham, these two words are not originally Arabic, by the way. They are Persian words. So Islam has come and recognized the currencies that were in circulation at the time. So does this mean that the concept of currency in Islam is limited to gold and silver? No. No one would say that the concept of money in Islam is limited to gold and silver, because we don't find any Sharia text limiting the concept of money to gold and silver, right? So rather we find that, let's say, the Sharia, seeing that, let's say, people are using gold and silver as currencies, the Sharia subjected transactions in currencies in gold and silver to certain rules, to certain strict rules, which are known to be the rules of riba. And it's not the riba which relates to sale contract, rather the riba that would relate to loan contract, rather that would relate to sale contract, because we know in Islam that we have two types of riba. We have riba in debt and we have riba in sale. So riba in debt means that we are not supposed to lend money on interest, and the concept of lending here is never limited to money. Anything cannot be lent on interest. I cannot, let's say, lend you one mobile for two mobiles. And we have another variety of riba, which is called riba in sale. This one applies to certain commodities, including gold and silver, as the hadith said, as gold for gold, silver for silver, spot to spot, equal to equal. So the Sharia subjected the transactions of gold and silver to certain rules. And the Sharia meant, of course, intended from subjecting these transactions to these rules, to these very strict rules, of course, to safeguard the functions of currency, to safeguard the function of money in Islam. So what are the functions of money in Islam? Of course, the Islam is no different from any other economic theory when it comes to the function of currency in Islam. So we know that the common functions of currency, of course, are that the currency has to meet that the functions of currency in any economy, including Islam, of course, is to be used as means of exchange, which means that, let's say, if I have money, I can get things that have utility, because you see there is no intrinsic value in gold and silver or in currency in general. Currency is not meant for itself. Currency is meant, let's say, to obtain things that have intrinsic, what we call utility. Like, let's say, I can buy food, I can buy drinks, I can buy clothes. So with money, we can have access to things that have really real benefits, while money is not meant for itself. So this means that if you have money, you have access to all things that have direct utility or indirect utility. The other function of money in Islam or in economy in general is, of course, to be used as a store of value, which means that, let's say, if you have money, you have access to things that have value. For example, if I'm saving $1,000, then I know that in the future I'll be able to have access to things that may benefit me. So I'm storing value. I'm like storing purchasing power for the future. So it's a means of exchange for spot transactions that I'm engaging now. And money is also a store of value, which means that with money I can ensure that I will have access to whatever I may need in the future. And also, money is also a unit of account, which means that I can measure the monetary value or the market value of things with referring to this benchmark. So, for example, I would know that this desktop worth in the market $3,000. I would say $3,000. This mobile worth $1,000. Let's say this chair worth $200. So I need to refer to a benchmark to determine the market value of things. And this is the meaning of unit of account. And it could be to your surprise that the Sharia Islamiyah has highlighted this economic functions of money much time before the modern theories of money. And we can see, for example, that a scholar like Al-Qarafi, like Ibn Taymiyyah, they have, as we'll come to see later on, they have outlined the functions of money. And of course, a scholar like Ibn Taymiyyah subscribes to the 8th Hijri century, which corresponds to the 13th century AD. And also Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn al-Qarafi also belongs to the same century. So the functions of money were discussed and highlighted and outlined by our scholars, the Muslim scholars. So they talked about the functions of money and most of the rules that I'm going to discuss today. Now, people started after, let's say, with the advance of cryptocurrency, they started, like, say, raising or putting some questions. Is like cryptocurrency halal or haram? Of course, the very question is wrong, by the way, to say cryptocurrency is halal and haram, because as I told you, people would use cryptocurrency either as currency, supposed to, let's say, to charge the same or to meet the same functions of money, or they will use it for trading. So different uses of cryptocurrency, and the currency in itself, just like any instrument, doesn't have or doesn't carry any Sharia value. Just like, let's say, a glass. The glass doesn't carry any Sharia value. The glass cannot be deemed as halal or haram. It all depends on what you use the glass for. So that's similarly, if the currency depends on what you use the currency for. If you use it for halal purpose, then it's halal. If you use it for haram, then it's haram. If you trade in it, let's say, in a way which is Sharia compliant, then it's halal. If you trade it in a non-Sharia compliant manner, then it's haram. So the very question of is the cryptocurrency, is Bitcoin halal or haram? This question is wrong in itself. It all depends on what you use the currency for. So far we know that the Sharia has not limited the concept of money in Islam. I literally quotes, let's say, some Sharia text just for the sake of clarification. For example, Ibn Taymiyyah, I believe that some of the participants are Arabs. They know, or at least they understand Arabic. So I will read in Arabic first, then I'll translate to English. Ibn Taymiyyah, who subscribes, as I said, to the 8th Hijri century, says, وَأَمَّا الدِّرْهَمُ وَالدِّينَارُ فَمَا يُعْرَفُ لَهُ حَدٌّ طَبِيعِيٌّ وَلَا شَرْعِيٌّ بَلْ مَرْجِعُهُ إِلَى الْعَادَةِ وَالْإِصْطِلَاحِ. So he says, dirham and dinar, there's no like defining rule or defining Sharia rule for it, in the sense that limiting the concept of currency to dirham or dinar. Rather, he says that this is a customary issue. If the custom would recognize something as currency, then the Sharia would recognize it as such. But if people don't recognize it as currency, the people will not recognize it as such. And Ibn Hazm also says كل شيء يجوز بيعه فهو ثمن. Ibn Hazm al-Andalusi, he says anything which can be exchanged can function as currency. And he says ولا ندري من أين وقع لكم الاقتصار بالتثمين على الذهب والفضة. He says, where on earth you got this concept, that concept of money is limited to gold and silver? Because even at the time of Ibn Hazm, there used to be some advocates of gold and silver. So they would say that the currency should only be gold and silver. So Ibn Hazm is objecting to this and says that, where did you get this from? There's no single Sharia text limiting the concept of currency to gold and silver. It's open. Whatever people may recognize as currency would be treated from Sharia perspective as currency and would also be recognized by currency. And even Imam Malik bin Anas, who is the founder of the second school in Islamic law, because the first one was the Hanafi, then came the Maliki. Imam Malik bin Anas says, even if people would start using, let's say, the animal hide as currency, then the animal hide, or this new currency, which is of course made of animal hide, would be subjected to the same Sharia rules, which of course suggests that the concept of money is never limited to gold and silver. So the point here, our conclusion so far is that the concept of money is never limited to gold and silver. And this is very important because this adds flexibility to Islamic financial system or Islamic monetary system, because this means that we can welcome new currencies, we can mint new currencies, not necessarily gold and silver. So anything that would be recognized by people or used as currency would be acceptable to the Sharia if they would feel, of course, the Sharia conditions of a valid currency. So this would, of course, bring us to discuss the Sharia conditions of a valid currency. When would the Sharia recognize something which is recognized by people or used as currency? When would the Sharia recognize it as currency? So this brings us to discuss the Sharia conditions of a valid currency. So the first condition is, of course, the wide acceptability. The currency has to be widely accepted by people. If it's accepted by some people and not accepted, let's say, by the other people, then this currency would not be able to meet its functions. So the same three functions, if some people would accept it, others wouldn't accept it, then of course this currency would not meet the Sharia conditions of a valid currency. Why? Because let's say it wouldn't be a good means of exchange, because not all people, of course, would accept it. And it wouldn't be, let's say, a unit of account, because let's say, since some people would accept it, others wouldn't accept it. So it wouldn't be a valid unit account. And also it wouldn't be a good store of value, right? Because maybe people are accepting now today. If I'm saving this currency for the future, maybe in the future, people wouldn't accept it. So that's why we say that it's not a valid currency. So wide acceptability is very critical for the Sharia to recognize something as a valid currency. The other condition is that it has to, let's say, has to be relatively stable in terms of value. Of course, we cannot say that it has to be like having a fixed value, because even gold and silver don't have fixed values, right? So, but they have to be what we call their value has to be relatively stable. For example, the currencies that we use nowadays, be them, let's say, paper currencies or digital currencies. So these currencies have to be stable. Maybe some of you would say that even now the modern day currencies are not stable. Like, let's say, as we have witnessed, for example, in some modern currencies like the Turkish lira, or even, let's say, the Iraqi dinar or the Syrian pound, because these currencies are subjected to high volatility. They are highly volatile. So does this mean that they were not recognized from Sharia point of view? No, we cannot say so. Even though they have, let's say, this excessive volatility, but they still can be recognized as a valid currency from Sharia point of view. Why? Because you see, we have, in the fiqh, under Islamic law, we have the so-called fiqh maxims. And one of the fiqh maxims says, يغتفر في البقاء ما لا يغتفر في الابتداء, which means يغتفر في الابقاء ما لا يغتفر في الابتداء, which means what can be overlooked after some, cannot be overlooked, let's say, at the beginning. What can be, let's say, overlooked at a later stage may not be overlooked at the beginning. So even though the modern day, some of the modern day currencies, like let's say, as I say, the Turkish lira, for example, nowadays, even though it's highly volatile, but this what didn't, let's say, drive the currency out of the scope of a valid currency from Sharia perspective. Because it's, as I said, the volatility is accidental, it's casual, and it's when the currency was first incepted or introduced, it was stable at the time. So now, accidentally, exceptionally, now it's highly volatile, but it's still recognized, it's still backed by the government. So if it's backed by the government, then we can get, we can be assured that, let's say, it would remain a valid currency to some extent, even though the volatility is excessive. But this high volatility can be removed at any time. So it goes back to the normal state, which is, let's say, enjoying a stable or a relatively stable volatility. So what the meaning of the Fiqh magazine, what can be overlooked later may not be overlooked, let's say, at the beginning. So if we now to start, let's say, a currency which is designed in a way that would make it highly volatile, then the Sharia wouldn't accept it. Like, let's say we introduce now a currency and we tell people, look, this currency is going to be highly volatile. So the Sharia in this case wouldn't accept this currency because we tell it's known in advance that it's going to be highly volatile. But if it starts, let's say, with a stable value, and then let's say it through for certain considerations or due to certain conditions, it start losing its value and being subjected, let's say, to some volatility. The Sharia wouldn't withdraw its recognition in this case. It would still recognize it, but under, of course, direct control of it. Because if, let's say, the situation, let's say, lasts for long, that it remains like highly volatile for so long time, maybe we need to then to reconsider that, the recognition, the Sharia recognition of that currency. But this may not be, let's say, applicable to a currency that's recognized as a legal tender by the government, because there's a central authority which is, let's say, supervising and controlling this currency and making sure that even though it may lose value, and the value lost could be significant, but the government would always make sure that, let's say, it would always still have value. But let's say if the currency has no central authority to supervise it, to control it, then if it's highly volatile, then the Sharia, of course, would reconsider its position on this currency being validly recognized by the Sharia. So it's very critical that the stability of the currency is very critical. Why? Because otherwise, if with unstable or with highly volatile currency, the three functions of currencies in Islam wouldn't be met. Because if, let's say, just imagine that, let's say, a currency is, let's say, loses, let's say, significantly its value due to inflation. So this means that with it, I will not be able to access things that have value. If I, for example, with one unit of this currency, I'm able to buy, for example, 1 kilogram of bread, but maybe after a month from now, I'll be able to buy only 100 grams of bread. So this would, people with time will start, let's say, losing confidence in this currency, and they will prefer to replace it with more stable currency. And that's what happens sometimes now in some currencies. Like in Syria, for example, people prefer to use dollars instead. Why? Because due to the high volatility of the currency. So would it become like, let's say, a valid or a preferable means of exchange? And the same also goes, let's say, for a store of value, because people, especially when it comes to saving, they wouldn't prefer to use a currency that would lose value, which is a currency which would thought to be losing value with time. So they would prefer to resort to, let's say, to gold, or maybe to any currency that they believe it's more stable in value. And when it comes to unit of account, of course, it's obvious, because let's say if the unit of account is not fixed in itself, then it's not a valid unit of account. Just like, let's say, the one meter, let's say, being 99 centimeter today and being, let's say, 101 centimeter tomorrow. Of course, this would prevent this unit of account from being a valid unit of account. It's a valid measurement, because one of the functions of money in Islam, as I already said, is to measure the monetary value of things. So say that this would worth 10,000, 2,000, this would worth 1,000, this would worth 500. So if the benchmark that I'm using here is not fixed in value, then of course this would make the very benchmark, not valid as a unit of account. So people wouldn't use it as a unit of account. That's, let's say, That's what we see now in countries, for example, like in Turkey or like in Syria, or they would say when it comes to pricing, valuable things, they wouldn't price it with the local currency. Rather, they would price it with a foreign currency like the USD. So this property is $200,000, $300,000, and they wouldn't use, of course, the local currency. So stability of value is very critical, of course, for the recognition for the Sharia recognition of the currency. And another thing, of course, another condition is, of course, the wide acceptability, as I said, and stability in value and protection of value. So if the currency has its own intrinsic value, like gold and silver, of course, we know that gold and silver, they don't need, let's say, to have government standing behind them to ensure that they remain valuable, because they have intrinsic value. People tend to, you see, to buy gold, to save gold, to keep gold, because they know that if they have gold, they will have access. They are they can be easily liquidated, and they can have access to all things that they want to acquire. But if the currency, let's say, doesn't have intrinsic value, like let's say the fiat currency or the paper money or the digital or the crypto currency, of course, then we need to have, like, let's say, an authority standing behind it, ensuring that this currency would have a value. Otherwise, we fear that maybe this currency would be abolished, or let's say it would disappear, just like what happened, let's say, to some cryptocurrencies recently. I mean, you know that more than 100,000 cryptocurrency have been introduced to the market, but out of them, hundreds have disappeared from the market. So you know that the Sharia wouldn't tolerate such a thing. One of the what we call the 5 essential values in Islam is preservation of wealth, right? حفظ المال. So حفظ المال is one of the critical objective of the Sharia, which means that anything that, let's say, this means that, of course, we are not supposed or allowed from Sharia point of view to expose our wealth to unnecessary risk. So if we recognize a currency that's highly volatile, or the currency that has no, let's say, there's no guarantee that, let's say, it would remain valuable in the market, then the Sharia wouldn't recognize it. So if the currency, again, the Sharia has no objection, let's say, to introducing or welcoming any currency, even though it doesn't have intrinsic value, because we have currency that have intrinsic value like gold and silver, and we have currencies whose value is technical. As we say in Arabic, we say that عملتها اصطلاحية. It's technical. It means that it doesn't have any value on its own, but the people have agreed to assign value to it. So people have accepted that. Just like the paper money that we use nowadays. Of course, the paper money, in terms of intrinsic value, their value is very, very trivial, the paper money. They have no value, almost no value, because their value is very trivial. But since people have widely accepted the paper money like USD, like any local currency or international currency, then it starts, of course, having value, and people, of course, would tend to safeguard it and to keep it and also use it. So if the what we call the value of the currency is technical, then we have to come up with a mechanism that would ensure that this currency would always have value. Not necessarily for the value to be ultimately absolutely stable. No, relative stability is sufficient, but we have to make sure that there's also an authority which is responsible for this currency, ensuring that it would always have value. Otherwise, the Sharia wouldn't allow us to deal with this currency. Why? Because we'll be, let's say, exposing our wealth to risk. And of course, in Sharia, it's not up to us, even though we say that this is money, this is our money, we have earned that money. But from Sharia point of view, even though you own the money, but you don't have the right to do whatever you like with your wealth, with your money. Just like, let's say, for example, lending on interest. You cannot say that, okay, I'm agreeable to paying interest, so this is my money and I'm agreeable to paying interest. The Sharia says no. It's true that this is your money, but you have to observe the Sharia rules when it comes to dealing in money. You cannot say that I'm okay with gambling. I'm okay with, let's say, buying a raffle ticket and taking the risk of gambling. No, the Sharia says no. It's not up to you. Even though this is your money, yes, it's your money, But the Sharia says no, you have to protect and preserve your money. So it's not up to us, let's say, as I said, to expose our wealth to unnecessary risk. We have to subject all our financial transactions to the Sharia rules. And these Sharia rules, by the way, especially when it comes to rules of riba, rules of riba are meant to preserve the what we call the economic functions of currencies in Islam. For example, you know that in Islam, when we exchange money for money, the exchange has to be on the spot. When I'm selling, for example, USD dollars against Bahraini dinar, the transaction has to be on the spot. Why? Why? I mean, with the Sharia says if exchanging, let's say selling Bahraini dinar for Bahraini dinar, of course, it has to be at par. I cannot, let's say, sell you 5 dinar today for 6 dinars tomorrow. This is obvious because otherwise people will people would sell dinar to justify interest. They would sell dinar rather than lend dinar. So they would say, I'm not lending you 5 dinars for 6 dinars, rather I'm selling you 5 dinars for 6 dinars. So riba will be committed, let's say, through a sale contract. But how about, let's say, exchanging 5 dinars for, let's say, $3? It's still haram from Sharia point of view if the transaction is not effected on the spot. So why this transaction when it comes to exchanging money for money, the transaction has to be on the spot in order to curb or prevent speculation. Because you know what happens in the financial markets when it comes to, for example, future contracts, to swaps, to options. So people, let's say, would speculate and would trade in different assets, including also money. And money, of course, there are certain assets in Islam that have, let's say, certain that have been treated or recognized as highly valuable, and this is of course related to the so-called riba of sale contract. I mean, al-amwal ribawiyya. You know this hadith: gold for gold, silver for silver, wheat for wheat, barley for barley, salt for salt, dates for dates. So the Sharia has mentioned certain commodities and subjected their transaction to strict Sharia rules. Why? Because these commodities are very important, and the Sharia wants to preserve these commodities from and protect them from manipulation of people. Protect these what we call important economic elements or factors from excessive speculation. So the Sharia says when money is sold for money, the transaction has to be on the spot. What's the purpose of this rule? Is to prevent speculation, because if you speculate in currencies, this would cause high volatility in the currency in question. And this high volatility, of course, would impair the economic functions of money. So let's say, because due to excessive speculation, certain currencies, regardless of whether the currency is backed, let's say, by some tangible assets or backed even by economies. You know, remember what happened back in 1997 in the Tiger Asian countries. So even though these currencies were, let's say, they were like governmental currencies issued by the governments, but due to excessive speculation, they lost a significant portion of their value. Why? Because they were subjected to high speculation, to excessive speculation. So the Sharia, you see, the point that I'm trying to make here is that currency in Islam is what we call the most important economic element, the most important economic element ever in the Islam. And that's why dealing in currencies has been subjected to strict Sharia rules. What's the purpose of restricting or subjecting these currencies to strict Sharia rules? Is to preserve and maintain and safeguard what we call the economic functions of currency. So because with excessive speculation, excessive trading, then of course the currency would lose value, because you know that what happens due to, let's say, some practices in financial market, like let's say through futures or through margin trading or through short selling, people of course will speculate and will trade and will speculate in certain assets, and this would of course increase or decrease the market value of the speculated assets, in the sense that it would either harm the end user or would harm, of course, the producer. Excessive speculation on currencies or excessive speculation on any important commodity, like let's say wheat, for example, or oil nowadays, would either harm the producer if the speculations if the trading, the excessive trading, will cause the market value of the commodity in question would the market value would deteriorate, or would, let's say, would decline. This would harm the producer, or it could lead, let's say, to increase in the market value of the commodity or the currency in a way, of course, that would harm the end user if the speculation would cause an increase in the market value of the commodity, or even in the currency. And of course, you know that the currencies, of course, even if certain commodities like oil, like wheat, like barley, are critical and important according to the Sharia point of view, of course, the currencies are even much more important. Why? Because there are some functions that are expected from the currencies, which are not expected, of course, from any other commodity. So this explains why the Sharia has subjected the currencies to strict Sharia rules. Now, so to conclude, we have three Sharia rules for any currency to be validly recognized as a valid Sharia, as a valid currency from Sharia point of view. So that they have to have, like it says, stability in value, and also they have to be widely acceptable to people, and they have also to, I mean, their value has to be protected, potentially protected. There's some if the currency, of course, doesn't have any intrinsic value, if it's let's say value is technical, istilahi, as we say, then we have to make sure that there is always an authority responsible for it to ensure that its value remains protected. So can we see that these three economic or these three conditions, these three Sharia conditions, are fulfilled in the in a cryptocurrency? Now we'll try now to apply the same what we call conditions to cryptocurrency. But before that, I would also draw your attention to a very important Sharia rule, which is not normally mentioned in the context of what we call the discourse on cryptocurrency. If the Sharia does not limit the concept of money to a certain currency, or to a certain what we call metal, or let's say the concept of money in Islam is unlimited. Anything can be used as a valid currency, as long as it has met the Sharia conditions. But this would never mean that, let's say, the issuance of the currency is open to anyone. So saying that the concept of money is not limited to gold and silver is one thing, and saying that, let's say, anyone can issue a currency is another thing. Why? Because in Islam, even though the concept of money is never limited to gold and silver, but the Sharia doesn't give authority to anyone to issue currencies. I will quote for you some Sharia texts in that regard. So you see, Imam al-Nawawi, he subscribes also to the 13th century and to the 7th Hijri century. He says, يكره لغير الإمام ضرب الدراهم والدنانير وإن كانت خالصة لأنه من شأن الإمام ولأنه لا يؤمن فيه الغش والإفساد. So Imam Nawawi says it's not becoming, or the government, or the issue, what's called the minting of money. Minting of money is limited to the government and shouldn't be handled by anyone other than the government. Shouldn't be handled by anyone other than the government. Why? Because there's no guarantee that, let's say, the issuance of money in this case will lead some harms, will lead some more harms than benefits. So this is by Imam al-Nawawi. So he says it is invalid for anyone other than the ruler to issue dirham and dinar, even if they are pure and defect free. And even, let's say, because maybe some people would think that, I mean, this fuqaha had made some statements just to ensure that, let's say, the dirham would meet its expected weight. or the dinar would meet its expected weight. No, no, this is not the only reason. Imam Nawawi says this minting money has to be, of course, he's here talking about gold and silver, but if gold and silver uh, should be handled, the minting of gold and silver should, of course, must be handled by the government, then with all means, يعني من باب أولى, with all means, the same would apply to any currency, especially if the currency is technical. So Nawawi says it is invalid for anyone other than the ruler to issue dirham and dinar, even if they are pure and defect-free, because this is the responsibility of the ruler. And because the absence of fraud and corruption is not then guaranteed. So the absence of corruption is not guaranteed. Ibn Ahmad bin Hanbal, who also he subscribes, of course, to the 9th century and the third Hijri century. He says it's not appropriate to mint dirham except in the official minting house. So minting dirham has to be done in the official minting house with the permission of the Sultan. Because if people were given permission to do so, they would cause economic corruption and instability. So they would cause corruption and instability. So what does this mean? You see, we can perceive or we can foresee two problems when it comes to issuing currencies by any authority other than the government or by anyone other than the government. Maybe there could be some fraud. I mean, in the currency printed, there could be some fraud, or let's say, could be some defects, for example, or fraudulent, say. So they would, let's say, the currency would not be genuine. And also another concern, which is very critical also from Shariah point of view, is to control the volume of the currency in the market. To control the volume of the currency in the market. Why? Because if there's, let's say, there is increase in currencies without introducing a counter increase in the assets, this would lead to inflation. This would lead to inflation. So we have to ensure that the volume of currency in circulation corresponds to the value of assets in circulation. Because if there is increase in the currencies without a counter increase in the assets, then this would lead, of course, to inflation. And conversely, if, let's say, there's the volume of the assets in circulation is higher than the amount of currency in circulation, this would lead to deflation. And that's why the issuance of currency, any currency, has to be handled by authorities. Why? Because the authorities, in order to avoid the corruption, as highlighted by Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, in order to avoid corruption and instability, the government would always watch the volume of the assets. So they would issue, or they would mint currency in correspondence with the amount of assets available in the market, in order to avoid deflation or avoid deflation. So subhanAllah, there's also hadith that I have come across in which Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam says that don't remove a currency from circulation unless there is a very valid reason to do so. So Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, نهى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أن تكسر سكة المسلمين إلا من بأس. أن تكسر سكة المسلمين, which means that you remove currency from circulation. Of course, at that time they used to use gold and silver. As if you're removing gold and silver from circulation and transferring the gold and silver into jewelry or something else. So Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, never do this. Why? Because if we remove a currency from circulation, this would cause deflation. So this means that the volume of currency to be introduced or to be issued or to be minted has to be closely monitored in order to ensure that the volume of currency corresponds to the volume of assets, in order to avoid deflation or avoid inflation. So this point is very critical from Shariah point of view, and it's very relevant, of course, to the point that we are discussing today. Because when it comes now to the cryptocurrency, you know that, of course, the cryptocurrency is not handled by any centralized authorities. Rather, it's done by people. Anyone who has the technical knowledge and had the capacity to mint a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin would be able to do so. So what would be the implication if, I mean, from this angle, from this perspective, when it comes to inflation and deflation? If people have the authority, or they have, let's say, the capacity to issue their own money and to use it in the market, especially now You see, trading now is like global now. While I'm sitting now at my office, I can buy assets anywhere in the world, right? So I'm as if I'm introducing an international currency when I'm minting a new currency and introducing it to the market. So this is a very critical Sharia concern that let's say and when it comes to issuance of currency, this has to be handled by certain authorities, or at least we have to make sure that let's say the volume of the currency that we introduce or mint, of course, corresponds to the value of asset. But with the absence of higher authorities or with the absence with direct control, of course, no one would be able to make sure that let's say the volume of currency corresponds to the volume of the assets, and this would lead, of course, to inflation. Nowadays, of course, when it comes to Bitcoin, of course, you know that can be handled by anyone, and the volume of a Bitcoin like currency, cryptocurrency like Bitcoin is capped at 121 million, I think, 21 units. And if 1 unit would worth now around, I think now it's 80,000 something. So what do you expect? I mean, this would definitely lead to inflation on the global level. On the global level, this is one currency. Now we have we have Bitcoin, and we have Ethereum, and we have, you see, who knows what will have, what currencies will come in existence in the future. So this is a valid Sharia concern, a very critical Sharia concern, that we have to ensure that the currency in circulation, of course, on the global level also corresponds to the volume of assets. So these are what we call the basic and critical Sharia rules. Try now to apply these rules to Bitcoin. Let's take Bitcoin as an example. So when it comes, for example, to wide acceptability, is Bitcoin widely acceptable in the Islam? But to people now, of course, now we know that there are some countries that have banned cryptocurrency in general, and Bitcoin in particular. They have banned it due to the risks that are associated with it, like let's say money laundering. And of course, money laundering is also a Sharia concern. Also, it's also a Sharia concern that people with a cryptocurrency would be able, let's say, to do some illegal activities, and of course even to do money laundering. So when it comes to wide acceptability, Bitcoin so far is not widely accepted. It's true that it has been, subscribed to and traded by high volume of people, but if you study, the cryptocurrency and the performance of cryptocurrency, you find that most of people who would buy it cryptocurrency, they would buy it not for the sake of using it as currency. Rather, most of the transactions in cryptocurrencies are meant for trading. So people would buy Bitcoin just for the sake of trading, to make, like, say, a quick gain. And those who buy it to use it as currency are very, limited in number compared to those who would buy it just for the sake of trading. So when it comes to wide acceptability, of course, Bitcoin has not met what we call the threshold, which is necessarily, for example, for a global recognition of the currency from Sharia perspective. Now, when it comes to protection of value, of course, you know that, let's say, from time to time we hear incidents where people would lose, let's say, the key address, and by losing the key address, you wouldn't have access, of course, to this digital money which is stored on your hard disk. And we also hear stories that people may be able to hack, let's say, cryptocurrencies, Bitcoins, and there are many incidents that really where the Bitcoin was stolen through hacking. So when it comes also to what we call protection of value, this issue is critical from Sharia point of view, because they see there's no guarantee to the value of Bitcoin, and also we don't know who stands behind Bitcoin, right? We don't know, for example, if, let's say, one day we'll wake up and decide that, let's say, we'd find that cryptocurrency is no longer valuable. And because the same happened to other cryptocurrencies, by the way. Hundreds of cryptocurrencies disappeared. People subscribed to them, they bought them, they thought that they would be able to make some quick gain, but they just lost value. So maybe the same thing will happen. Why? Because there is no, because a centralized authority that's standing behind Bitcoin and ensuring that it would always remain valuable, even though if the value, let's say, is volatile, is unstable, but at least, let's say, to have an authority ensuring to us that Bitcoin would remain valuable. Now, when it comes to the to, let's say, to the what we call wide acceptability and protection of value and preservation of wealth. You see, preservation of value. This is, I mean, we know that, let's say, the performance of a currency or a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin has been very, very, very volatile. So it started with cents, and it's I think it's exceeded 120,000 recently, and now it's I think it's around 80,000. So, and it has witnessed high volatility. And from Sharia point of view, such highly volatile currency wouldn't be recognized as currency. It wouldn't be recognized as currency. Why? Because this high volatility, as I said, would impair the economic functions of money in Islam, being a mean exchange, a unit of account, and a store of value. Some of you, I know, that will say that the same also goes to, the same also goes to some local currencies. True, but as I told you, from Sharia point of view, when we يعني يغتفر في البقاء ما لا يغتفر ابتداء. So currencies like a Turkish lira, it was not highly volatile. It was relatively stable, but recently it started losing its value. But this is accidental, and maybe things, let's say, will return back to normal. But when we're about now to issue a new Sharia rule for the cryptocurrency, and while issuing this rule, we study this currency and we find it, let's say, highly volatile. So this would make us, of course, I mean, that would make us, let's say, not able to attach what we call a Sharia recognition to this currency. Why? Because it has been designed in a way that would make it open to high volatility. Cryptocurrency is designed in a way that would make it open to high volatility, especially with the practice that we find now in the financial market. You know that even people have started using now margin trading and also short selling to trade in cryptocurrency. And thanks to this, of course, acts, thanks to, let's say, to this of practices in the financial market, of course the volatility would be even volatility will be even more evident. So that's why we cannot say that, let's say, the cryptocurrency, a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin is enjoying as a relatively stable value in a way that the Sharia would recognize it. So if, let's say, if we come to the conclusion that the Sharia or that cryptocurrency or that Bitcoin, for example, that Bitcoin has not managed or has not been successful in fulfilling the Sharia requirements, it hasn't met the Sharia requirements for a valid currency, would that mean that we are not allowed, let's say, to buy this currency? Well, buying a currency is one thing, and using it as a currency is another, or recognizing a currency is another thing. If you happen, let's say, to own it, of course, it's not recommended that you subscribe it because you subscribe to cryptocurrency or to buy a currency like Bitcoin. But if you happen, let's say, to own it, then, of course, the Sharia rules, certain Sharia rules would apply to it. Because even though it's not a currency from Sharia point of view, so far, but maybe in the future it would, I mean, this challenges or this, let's say, shortcomings will be overcome, so that people will start, let's say, accepting it more widely, and it would have stable value and its value will be protected. If this happens, then the Sharia, of course, wouldn't mind recognizing a cryptocurrency or a Bitcoin in this case. Why? Because the Sharia says, has ruled, if the rules are fulfilled, then the Sharia would recognize it. But if the rules have not been fulfilled, then Sharia wouldn't recognize it. But that not recognizing it by the Sharia doesn't mean that it doesn't have any value. No, it has a value. It has a value. And if people happen, let's say, to acquire it for some reason, or they were gifted cryptocurrency, so their transactions have also to be subject to Sharia rules, in the sense that I cannot, let's say, lend you one Bitcoin for 2 Bitcoins. Otherwise, I will be falling in riba. I will be committing riba. If I have cryptocurrency, I have to pay zakah on it because it's valuable. So when the conditions of zakah are fulfilled, I have to pay zakah on the cryptocurrency. And I'm not supposed, let's say, to unjustly appropriate a cryptocurrency from others. So if I steal a cryptocurrency, then I'm also prone to the penalty. I'm prone to penalty. Why? Because this is also would be considered from Sharia point of view as theft, not theft in the technical sense, because in Islam, taking someone's wealth comes under different kinds. Could be theft, could be It could be, let's say, theft, because theft has its own Sharia rules. Theft, that Sariqa has its own Sharia rules, but taking money unjustly from others could be in the form of theft, or it could be in different forms. So taking Bitcoin would be deemed as haram. At least it would be deemed as haram, and the one who would force take it unjustly from others would be subjected to strict Sharia penalties. So currency, Bitcoin is valuable, and it's money in the sense that it has a value, but it's not a valid currency so far from Sharia point of view. So far, it's not a valid currency from Sharia, but maybe things will change in the future. So if things change, if circumstances change, let's say the characteristics of Bitcoin change with time, then the Sharia, of course, would revisit its stand and would recognize it. This is one thing. The other point of discussion is tradability. Now, can we trade in Bitcoins knowing that Bitcoin is highly volatile? Well, the concept of gambling in Islam is never limited to, let's say, going to a casino for fun and to be, let's say, adrenaline driven and try to make some gains just for the sake of fun. The concept of gambling in Islam is much wider than this. Gambling in Islam means excessive gharar, excessive uncertainty. Whenever there is excessive uncertainty in a transaction, then the transaction becomes haram, unlawful from a Sharia point of view. And this would encompass, of course, gambling in the conventional sense, going to casinos or buying a raffle ticket, and would also include, like, let's say, a contract like future contract in the financial market. Why future contract is unacceptable from Sharia point of view? Because future contract, unlike forward, future, that future is done, let's say, in the financial market, and it's meant for speculation. So people would speculate on the market price of a certain commodity, and the transaction will not end in actual exchange of the commodity with the price. Rather, it would end with settling the price difference. So if we're speculating on the price of oil, for example, at a given time in the future, then of course one would be losing and one would be winning, because there will be change in the market price of them. And the change in the market price, the future price, could be in excess of the amounts that the strike price, I mean the price that we have agreed upon in the contract, that we have listed in the contract, or it could be lower than the strike price. And the one, of course, if there is increase in the market price above, of course, the strike price, then of course the buyer will have to pay the difference. So, and if it's the other way around, then the seller would have to pay the difference. So this transaction is not meant for actual what we call execution. Rather, it's meant only to gamble on something which is moving, something which is, let's say, volatile. Anything that doesn't have a fixed value, rather it's, like, say, volatile. Its value change from time to time. So that's why people would trade in indices, would even trade in futures in a way that would enable them to make a quick gain at the expense of other. And normally this quick gain comes at the expense of the other, which renders the transaction a zero-sum game. Just like in gambling. In gambling, when you win, your winning comes from the loss of others. This is the essence of gambling. It's a zero-sum game. Your gain comes at the expense of others, because your gain means that others have lost money. And the same happens in the financial markets nowadays, let's say in futures. In futures now, when you gain, of course, your gain equals the loss of the other contracting party. So that's why futures are unacceptable to Sharia point of view. Not to mention that technically you are postponing both values. And postponing both values, I mean the commodity as well as the price, is unacceptable from Sharia point of view. And this is why would the Sharia, let's say, would not tolerate postponing both values in order to curb and prevent speculation. You see, this rule, subhanAllah, this rules of riba, when Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, الذهب بالذهب والفضة بالفضة والبر بالبر والشعير بالشعير مثلا بمثل يدا بيد, hand to hand, that the Sharia says when exchanging these commodities, including gold and silver, which means money, including money. And all fuqaha would say that the concept of riba is never limited to barley or to wheat or dates, anything which is critical for the economy. I mean, so what constitutes a ribawi commodity? Anything which is important, any commodity which is critical and important to any economy. So the Sharia says when exchanging one commodity for the same or for a different but yet another ribawi commodity, the transaction has to be on the spot. Why? In order to prevent speculation. Subhanallah, yani 14 centuries ago, when the Sahaba, the companions of the Prophet, heard this hadith, some of them, like, they had problem in understanding the hadith. Why would the Sharia prohibit us, let's say, from selling 1 kilogram of wheat for 2 kilograms of barley, 1 kilogram of dates, let's say, for 3 kilograms of dates? What could be the reason? At the time, they didn't perceive, I mean, what we call the hikmah, the wisdom behind this. But nowadays, after we have witnessed what happens nowadays in the commodity market, in the financial market, in the money market, we see that the evils of these markets. We see how people would make quick gain at the expense of other. We see how these markets have been transferred just like into a gambling casino. So people, let's say, will make a quick gain without adding any, what we call, any value to the economy. Just that money would move from one pocket to another without adding anything substantial to the economy. So the Sharia says, don't expose your wealth to unnecessary risk. You have to subject your transactions to the Sharia rules, because these Sharia rules are meant to preserve your wealth. So as if this is the case, I mean, this is the concept of gharar, or the concept of the gambling, then the Sharia, of course, wouldn't allow us in principle to expose, as I said, our wealth to a risk like the risks that we find nowadays in trading in cryptocurrencies. It's true that some people have made huge fortunes from trading in a Bitcoin, but on the other hand, a lot of people have lost a lot from trading in Bitcoin. So this would render, I mean, the way people now trade in Bitcoin, or is similar to the way they trade in any, what we call, a commodity in the financial market through futures. The risk is almost the same, if it's even more excessive with Bitcoin. Why? Because Bitcoin doesn't lie back on any tangible assets. Well, at least the things that are traded in the commodity market, at least they have these are real assets. It's wheat, it's oil, it's barley, it's corn, it's rice. So the price would be somehow impacted or affected by the market price of that commodity. But when it comes to something that doesn't fall back on any tangible asset, on any underlying asset like Bitcoin, you would see that the volatility is more excessive and the risk is even bigger. So that's why we say trading nowadays, due to excessive speculation, due to excessive risk, due to, let's say, excessive volatility, trading in Bitcoin nowadays wouldn't be acceptable to the Sharia. Why? Because it's high risk. And to put it very simply, the Sharia doesn't allow us to, let's say, to expose our wealth to unnecessary risk. The Sharia says when you invest your money, this has to be through real economic activities. It has to be through the different investment contracts that we find in the Sharia Islamiyya, that we have in the Sharia Islamiyya, like mudarabat, musharakat, muzara'at, like, let's say, murabahat. I mean, these are if implemented, of course, properly. If these contracts are implemented properly, then these are real economic activities that would always add value to the economy and would preserve the wealth of all those who are involved in it. And so, on the other hand, the Sharia wouldn't allow us, let's say, to expose, as I said earlier, our wealth to unnecessary risk. Because even though this is our money, but the Sharia says you have to preserve your wealth. You have to preserve. So حفظ الدين, حفظ الدين وحفظ المال, so preservation of religion, preservation of life, preservation of wealth. These are critical Sharia values that we have to honor and we have to observe in our transactions. So you know that when we study something from Sharia point of view, we need to always, let's say, weigh it from a legal perspective. I mean, from fiqh perspective, and also from maqasid perspective. When it comes to fiqh rules, that fiqh all relates to halal and haram and conditions to be fulfilled or not to be fulfilled. When it comes to maqasid al-Sharia Islamiyya, here we are considering the macro objective of the Sharia Islamiyya. And one of the macro objectives of the Sharia Islamiyya is preservation of wealth. When it comes to this particular point, under maqasid, if we scrutinize something from maqasid perspective, we have to consider the pros and cons. We have to consider the benefits and the harms. So when it comes to this point, anything, of course, would have benefits and would have. There's no, like, let's say, pure evil and pure good. Or anything almost has some evil and has some good. Wine, for example, wine, even though it's wine, but it has some benefits. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, يسألونك عن الخمر والميسر قل فيهما إثم كبير ومنافع للناس. The ayah says there are some harms and there are some benefits in wine, but the harms outweigh the benefits. And that's why it was ruled as haram. And even in riba itself, bank interest, even there could be some virtues or some, let's say, benefits in interest, because people sometimes they would borrow in interest and they would expand the business and they would make profit, and this expansion of business would even help like the economy grow further. So there could be some, like, let's say, public benefit from interest, but yet it's haram. Why? Because even though it has some benefits, but it has more harms to the economy as well as in the rich, especially to the economy. So the Sharia, when it comes to things that have some benefits and had some merits and had some harms, the Sharia would always look at it from distance to see, does it have more harms than benefits, or it has more benefits than harms? The Sharia criterion when it comes to judging things as halal and haram depends on the volume of the benefits compared to the volume of harms. So if that thing, let's say, which is under question, if it has more harms than benefits, then the Sharia would say it's haram. If it has more benefits than harms, then the Sharia would allow it. So when it comes to Bitcoin, the way we know it nowadays, it has more harms than benefits, because people are losing from it, and those who lose are much more than those who make gain. And it fails due to high volatility, basically, to meet the Sharia requirements of a valid currency. So the conclusion is that so far, Bitcoin is not a valid currency from Sharia point of view. But maybe things will change in the future. So the Bitcoin will be able to meet the Sharia requirements. And maybe, let's say, we can restrict trading in cryptocurrency or in Bitcoin in a way that would reduce the high excessive, or the high excessive gharar in a way that would be tolerated by the Sharia. With this, I finish my presentation, and I would be happy to receive your questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abdul Azim. I think you covered quite a lot of pertinent points. In fact, this was very interesting to have a reminder of what are the variables that we need to consider, or requirement for any currency to qualify as a currency. So I think that was very enlightening, to say the least. And a different perspective has come about. In fact, I have not heard very many views where somebody has come in and said, Bitcoin is haram. Of course, there are various views. There are a lot more views coming in when people are saying that Bitcoin qualifies as a perfect currency for us to have. In fact, maybe it is more purer than the current form of currency that is there, because of its inherent nature of transparency and so on and so forth. Let's move on to, maybe in the interest of time, to some of the questions that we have. We have also the hand raised, but before I go to the hand raise, I'll go into this the Q&A tab, and we have some questions there, if that's okay with you. So the first question is, how does Islamic law address the issue of scams associated with cryptocurrency investment? Okay. Wow. Doctor, do you want to address it, or shall we move on? Because
scams, of course, I've already highlighted that. Let's say the trading or using in cryptocurrency or cryptocurrency like Bitcoin is associated with many risks, including scamming and hacking. So, of course, because of this, the Sharia would like take a very conservative stand and say that be careful. So at least to be careful and not to avoid, of course, all the risks that come with such a thing.
Thank you. Another question is, how if sometime in the future the underlying transaction is sufficient to anchoring the value of cryptocurrency, will this become halal?
Sorry, come again.
The question, if you says, how if sometime in the future the underlying transaction is sufficient to anchoring the value of cryptocurrency, will this become halal? I'm not sure if I understand the question correctly, but it's there in the Q&A tab.
I haven't understood the question, so.
Okay, let's come back to that in the interest of time. Brother Hamza is asking your view on the central bank digital currency, the CBDCs, introduced by various countries like Jamaica and Nigeria, he's asking. So he's asking your view on CBDCs.
You mean the central digital currency?
Central bank digital currency, that's right.
Yes, I mean, you see, as I said, the Sharia has no objection to introducing a new currency, be it digital or be it, let's say, physical, doesn't matter. As long as it meets the Sharia conditions, as long as it's qualified as a valid currency from Sharia point of view, it will be accepted. And of course, if it's issued by the central bank, of course, then most likely, of course, it would be acceptable to the Sharia, because all these what we call concerns will be removed.
So the three, it will qualify or it will pass the screens of the three variables that you mentioned: the wider acceptability, stability in value, and protection of value.
Exactly.
Okay, wonderful. Brother Mustafa, great to have you here. He's asking, what about stable coins?
Stable?
Stable coins.
What do you mean by
He's asking your view on the stable coin. What do we would it qualify as as a valid currency or no?
Stable coin. What's the concept of stable coin? What does he mean?
They are basically a type of cryptocurrency which is designed to reduce the price volatility typically associated with the bitcoins or Ethereum. They're usually pegged to stable assets such as the fiat currency. So they're pegged to the cryptocurrency, the USD or some commodities from that perspective.
Well, if it has a coverage of assets or other currencies that are stable, so that, let's say, the stability of the underlying assets would cause stability to the very stable coin, then of course it will be accepted from Sharia view and will be subject to the same rules of any currency. But if, let's say, the stability will not cause stability to the stability of the underlying asset will not cause stability to the stable coin, then of course it wouldn't be recognized from Sharia. So it all depends on, you see, these are the Sharia conditions: stability, preservation of wealth, and wide acceptability. If met, then it's fine.
Right. Okay. The next point is, does holding Bitcoin be considered halal because it's a form of investment similar to stocks? Okay, I think you've answered that, so we'll not go into that. The next question is, based on your submission and the three conditions to be fulfilled, i.e. stability of value, widely acceptable, and protection of the currency, it means it's not Sharia compliant. No Sharia compliant is available in the world as of today. Can it be acceptable as Sharia compliant if 2/3 of the conditions are there? So if
well, it's not a matter of compromise here. We don't. It's like reconciliation or compromise. No, the Sharia says, the Sharia is very clear. Conditions have to be fulfilled to qualify as a valid currency. So, but I mean, if of course the closer the currency comes, of course, to the Sharia recognition, of course, the more acceptable it becomes, of course, and the Sharia would be, let's say, more welcoming. But if it's far, of course, you see, if it's a sinful act, if we say that it's a sinful act, let's say to recognize a currency that has not qualified for the Sharia conditions of currency, then if the currency comes closer, then of course the sin itself will not be that, what we call serious.
Okay, thank you very much. We've got very limited time. Dr. Abdul Azim has to go, but we can take maybe a couple of questions if that's okay by voice. Brother Abdullah, Muhammad, you're allowed to ask by voice, so I would request you to keep your question very brief, so we have time to hear the reply. Brother Abdullah, you can speak by voice. Okay, I'm assuming no question. So Sam, do you have any question or comment? You're allowed to ask by voice. Okay. Either you can't hear me or the question has been answered.
Hello,
Kabiru,
hello. Can you hear me? Assalamu alaikum.
alaykum
Assalamu
salam.
alaikum.
Yes, I do have a question. So, thank you very much for the presentation, Dr. Abdulazim. I
Dr.
have a few
Isam.
comments, if you don't mind. I mean, the first, it's a very interesting presentation, but sometimes I feel that you are talking about the central bank digital currency, and sometimes I feel that you are talking about the cryptocurrency permissibility within the Sharia. So an early distinction in your presentation to clarify that you are specifically talking about the cryptocurrency will be helpful. Now, the second comment regarding the hadith of Ibn Taymiyyah. The hadith of Ibn Taymiyyah as the dirham and the dinar, there is no specific definition for them in Sharia. It comes mainly because of the weight. The weight, as you know, that 1 dinar used to be equal 4.25 gram of gold. So it comes to be to create some flexibility in terms of the specific weight, and then to create flexibility if you want to change the material for money and leave it to the society. There is an attempt, people talking why Bitcoin cannot be a digital gold since it's only 21 million coins in the world. An interesting point, which maybe you had no chance to explore it, is the mal, the money in Islam. What's the definition between mal and what is the money and what is the currency in Islam? We have concept like a thamaniya, and the manafi and huquq and all that stuff, and some, for example, Hanafi school of thought limit mal to tangible material and corporal ayn, so something physical. The physicality, it's a very important in some scholars point of view.
Dr.
Now,
Isam, sorry, we will have to be brief on this. Because we'll have to wrap up the session. I would appreciate if you can keep it brief.
yeah, now we agree there is no clear permissibility about the cryptocurrencies in Islam because of the lack of intrinsic value, volatility very high. Maybe the issue of the CBDC, it's a response to the cryptocurrency market. So the volatility, it become more higher there. I have other comments, but I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Isam.
Yeah, thank you very much. You're right. I mean, yes, Ibn Taymiyyah meant that the dirham and dinar were not defined in terms of weights, but also, I mean, he said as well. Let me just requote him. He says, وذكر بعضهم أن النقد ما تم الاتفاق على اعتباره حتى لو كان قطعة من حجر أو خشب. He says, dirham and dinar are not defined by weight or not defined even by essence. So he means the concept of money, the concept of currency, of course, is not limited to gold and dinar. And my discussion, of course, was for any currency other than the gold and silver or the paper money or the legal tender. I mean, the fiat money. So I mean, the discussion would apply and would encompass all sorts of currencies that could be introduced by people digitally or as cryptocurrencies. So the discussion, the same criteria would be applicable to all new currencies, especially those that can be introduced by individuals aside from authorities. Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Abdulazim. I have a lot more questions that have come in the last few minutes, but unfortunately, we are pressed for time, and I can only apologize for all those who have raised hands and put in some questions that unfortunately time is not on our side. And I would really appreciate if you can kindly send us these questions by in writing on islamicfinance@bibf.com. We will try and get a reply to these questions from Professor Abdul and share it with you. So, I think that can be a middle ground between, in finding a solution regarding some of your questions. So I'll put in the email addresses on the on the Q&A tab as well. Please use this if you have, any leading on questions from here. But I really, really appreciate. I know time is very limited, and that's always the case. And this video will be uploaded on YouTube, on BIBF YouTube channel. So please feel free to reach out there to revisit some of the concept that Professor Abdul has mentioned. And the idea through this is to just enlighten ourselves and engage in a beneficial conversation that helps us align to further thought process and enhance our understanding on some of these key topics. So I want to just thank, to start with Professor Abdul for sparing your time to be with us and sharing some of your thought processes, some of the thoughts around cryptocurrency and Bitcoin in particular from a Sharia perspective, and reminding us of some of the important variables that are required to be fulfilled for any currency to qualify as a currency. I'm very thankful for your time, and of course, I'm very, very thankful to our dear colleagues, brothers and sisters who have joined us from different parts of the world to be part of this talk series. Of course, we have not done justice to the overall discussion. Maybe we can have another session on it at a later stage, inshallah. But I would like to thank you all for being with us. And inshallah, the idea, the Islamic Finance Talk series will continue, on a monthly basis. Inshallah, we'll organize another topic next month. Please follow us either on Instagram or on our LinkedIn page for some other thought-provoking sessions. If you're interested in some of the training sessions, please visit our website or the social media platforms from that perspective. So I want to thank you all very much. And with that, I would like to excuse ourselves. And inshallah, we look forward to meeting you or physically meeting you again in future. Thank you very much, Professor Abdul. Thank you very much for being with us. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.